All right, welcome everyone to a deep dive I am so pumped for. This one goes out to you, listener, because you specifically requested it.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It is. We're diving into the Book of Five Rings by the legendary, and I do mean legendary, swordsman Miyamoto Musashi.
You can definitely say that again. This book is, well, I mean, it's so much more than just a guide to sword fighting.
Oh, for sure. It gets into strategy, philosophy, self-discovery. I mean, it really makes you think. And to help us break it all down, to give us some historical and philosophical context, well, we've got our resident expert on all things Japan right here.
Hey, glad to be here.
So to start, can you paint us a picture of what Japan was like when Musashi was alive?
Okay, so imagine Japan back in the late 1500s and early 1600s. This period was called the Sengoku period. And, well, basically it was complete chaos.
Chaos. In what way?
It was constant civil war. You had these powerful feudal lords, the daimyo, all fighting each other for control.
So like a real-life Game of Thrones, but with samurai instead of dragons.
Yeah, exactly. It was a super violent and unstable time. Figures like Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi, they really tried to unify the country.
And did they?
Well, they got close. But it was actually Tokugawa Ieyasu who finally brought everything together in 1603 when he established the Tokugawa shogunate.
And that's when things calmed down, right?
Yeah, things became a lot more peaceful under the shogunate. But one thing that remained was the rigid social structure. Samurai were at the very top, even if they were ronin, like Musashi.
Ronin, like masterless samurai.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wild. And so Musashi's living through all this. And I mean, his life was pretty intense too, right? Didn't he have his first duel at just 13 years old?
He did. At 13, he beats a seasoned swordsman. That was Arima Kihei.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder about, well, his childhood.
Right. Like what kind of childhood leads to that?
Well, he was born in 1584 and then was pretty much orphaned at 7. His priest uncle raised him. And, well, yeah, that first duel at 13 was just the beginning.
And then he goes on that crazy warrior pilgrimage, right?
Yeah. Traveling all over Japan, dueling, refining his skills. I mean, he won over 60 duels by the time he was 29.
60.
Over 60. Some of them are, well, they're almost unbelievable. Like there's this story where he defeats an opponent while he's carving a bow.
What? No way.
I know. It seems like he was always looking for a challenge.
Testing his limits. So it wasn't just about winning duels. He was trying to understand strategy at a deeper level.
Exactly.
And of course, there's that epic duel with Sasaki Kojiro.
Right. The one on the islands.
Yeah. Musashi shows up late, makes a sword out of an oar.
It's one of his most famous duels.
Yeah.
Kojiro was a master swordsman known for the swallow counter technique.
And Musashi just, like, improvises a sword.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He fashions it from an oar and ends up defeating Kojiro. What's interesting, though, is that after this victory, Musashi stopped using real swords in duels.
Really? Why? Was he just that good?
It might have been partly confidence, but I think it shows a deeper shift in his thinking. He was moving beyond winning just for the sake of winning.
It's like he was searching for something more.
Exactly. In fact, in the introduction to the Book of Five Rings, Musashi writes that he only really understood strategy at the age of 50.
50, long after all those duels. So the book is more about that later stage.
Yes. It's the wisdom he gained after all those battles. The book itself is divided into 5 sections. You could think of them as 5 books. They're named after the elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and void.
Okay, that's super interesting. So each book explores a different aspect of strategy.
Right. They build on each other. The Earth book is about the foundational principles. He compares strategy to carpentry.
So it's about having a strong base.
Exactly. Then, the Water book is all about adaptability, being fluid like water. The Fire book focuses on the spirit and tactics of fighting. The Wind book critiques other schools of swordsmanship. And finally, the Void book is, well, it's the highest level. It's about achieving a truly intuitive understanding of strategy.
So it's like a journey. You start with the basics and then progress to this like deeper understanding of strategy. I like that. I'm already intrigued. I think we should spend some time unpacking each of these books. What stood out to you in the Earth book?
Well, one thing that really struck me was how Musashi rejects overly stylized or profit-driven swordsmanship.
What do you mean by that?
It's like he's saying that, we waste so much time on things that don't really matter. Musashi is telling us to cut through the noise, literally and figuratively, and focus on what's essential. He really emphasizes constant practice in understanding the rhythm of a situation, just like a carpenter understands the wood they work with.
So it's not just brute force, but about being in tune with the situation.
Yes. Exactly. It's about developing an understanding of when to act, when to hold back. And he even talks about the four ways people pass through life: gentlemen, farmers, artisans, and merchants. Each has a different approach to strategy.
Wait, farmers. What does farming have to do with strategy?
Well, think about it. Farmers have to understand the seasons, the weather, and carefully plan their crops.
Oh, right. It's all about strategy.
Exactly. It's about managing resources, timing, and understanding the situation you're in.
So Musashi is saying strategy isn't just for warriors, but for everyone.
Exactly. It's a universal principle.
Okay, so we've seen how Musashi stresses, a strong foundation and a practical approach to strategy in the Earth book. But then, the only constant is change, right?
Right.
And that brings us to the Water book, right? It's
Yeah.
all about adapting.
It is. If the Earth book is about grounding ourselves, the Water book is, well, it's about learning to flow.
Flow.
Yeah. Musashi uses water as this metaphor for adaptability.
I like that.
But like water taking the shape of whatever container we're in?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us struggle with that, right? We get stuck in our ways. But Musashi's saying to really master something, you have to be fluid.
You have to be responsive. He talks about the importance of calmness,
Calmness.
mental and physical calmness, yeah. Cultivating an unbiased spirit.
Okay, how do we do that? I mean, easier said than done, right?
Well, he actually describes specific stances and a certain gaze.
What, like physically?
Yeah, like holding your head erect, your gaze steady, weight evenly distributed. It's
Hmm.
about, finding balance and stability, both mentally and physically.
Okay, so it's almost like meditation.
It's very similar to that.
Yeah.
And he talks about the 5 approaches of swordsmanship.
5 approaches, so like 5 different fighting styles.
You could think of it that way.
Cool.
So the first approach is about taking the initiative, like meeting your opponent head on with your sword pointed right at their face.
Mm.
It's about controlling the engagement from the start.
Okay, yeah, I see how that could be useful. Not even just in fighting, right? Like in a negotiation, taking charge.
Exactly. The second approach is, it's about anticipating your opponent's movements. You cut them as they attack and strike again if they evade. It requires quick reflexes.
So you have to be pretty skilled for that one.
Yeah. The third approach is a little more defensive. You wait for your opponent to strike, and then you disrupt their attack by hitting their hands.
From below.
Yeah.
So you use their momentum against them.
Exactly. And the fourth and fifth approaches involve more fluid movements. The key here is that there isn't one right approach. You have to adapt based on the situation.
So it's like having a toolbox of strategies and knowing which one to use.
Right. Musashi's teachings, they go way beyond just fighting. They're about conflict itself.
Yeah.
How to navigate it effectively.
And how to achieve our goals no matter what we're facing.
Right.
I love that. Now, the Fire book sounds pretty intense. Is it all about, like, combat techniques?
It is intense, but it's not just about techniques. It's more about, it's about cultivating the right mindset. You see, Musashi believed that the battlefield wasn't just a physical place. He saw it everywhere.
What, like every challenge is a battlefield?
Exactly. Even something like dealing with a difficult coworker. That could be a battlefield.
Okay, I like that. So how do we, conquer these everyday battlefields?
Well, one of the most interesting ideas he talks about is becoming the enemy.
Wait, becoming the enemy. I don't think I understand.
He's not saying we should literally become our enemies, of course.
Oh, okay.
It's more about trying to understand them, to see the world from their point of view, like why they're doing what they're doing.
Oh, okay. So it's about empathy, but also about gaining a strategic advantage.
Right. By understanding their motivations, their strengths, their weaknesses, we can anticipate their actions. And then there's timing, initiative. Musashi describes 3 methods to forestall the enemy. They're called Kendo-sen, Tai-no-sen, and Tai-tai-no-sen. It sounds complicated, I know.
Yeah, it does.
But it's basically about taking control of the situation before your opponent does.
So you don't let them dictate the terms.
Right.
You take charge.
Exactly. He believed that taking the initiative gives you a huge advantage. Think about a job interview. You walk in with confidence, you lead the conversation. That can make a big difference.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's about owning your space, not letting the situation control you.
This is great stuff. I'm already thinking about areas where I could be more proactive.
That's the point. Musashi's work is all about self-reflection.
It is. Okay, I'm ready for more. What insights does the Wind Book hold?
Well, this is where Musashi critiques other schools of swordsmanship.
Critiques. He was like a critic.
Yeah. He believed that a lot of schools focused too much on rigid forms and techniques. They weren't adaptable. He criticizes schools that rely on, brute strength or really complex techniques.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Right. Simplicity and directness are much more effective.
Hmm.
And, well, it's interesting. He never actually names the schools he's criticizing.
Why not?
I think he was making a broader point, like, don't get too attached to tradition. You have to be willing to adapt and evolve.
Yeah, don't get stuck in a rut.
Exactly. True mastery comes from understanding the principles behind things and then being able to adapt them to any situation.
Makes sense. Okay, that brings us to the final book, the Void Book. This one always seems a little mysterious.
It does, yeah.
What's the void all about?
Well, it's the highest level of understanding in Musashi's philosophy. It's about transcending conscious thought, like achieving this intuitive grasp of strategy. He describes it as nothingness.
Nothingness.
A place where you can access a deeper kind of wisdom without all the clutter of thoughts and preconceived notions.
So it's like clearing your mind.
It's not about emptying your mind completely, but more like clearing away, the clutter that clouds our judgment. It's about quieting the internal noise so you can see things more clearly.
So in the state of void, you're not overthinking, you're just acting, like instinctively.
Yes, exactly. It's about trusting your intuition.
Okay, but that's hard to do, right?
It takes practice, for sure.
Yeah.
Years of practice. Musashi believed that a void wasn't just for sword fighting, though. It's for life in general. It's about being fully present, fully engaged, without the burden of, overthinking everything.
Like athletes who talk about being in the zone.
Yeah, a great analogy. It's a path to, well, you could even say enlightenment in all areas of life.
Like a master key that unlocks your potential.
You could say that.
I love that. Now, before we move on, what was your biggest takeaway from the Book of Five Rings? Like, what really struck you?
What really stood out to me was his emphasis on interconnectedness.
Interconnectedness.
He saw the way in everything, like the way water moves or the way a carpenter works with wood.
Okay, yeah, like universal principles.
Yes. By understanding those principles, you unlock your potential.
It's like seeing the forest for the trees, right?
Exactly. It's about developing this like holistic understanding of how things work.
And how they relate to each other.
Exactly. That understanding can give you a real sense of clarity.
I love how he brings together all these different ideas: strategy, spirituality, art, nature.
It's all connected.
It is. That's one of the things that makes his work so powerful. He's not just teaching us how to fight, he's teaching us how to live. Okay, one last question about the void before we move on. It still feels a little abstract. What's a practical takeaway we can use in our own lives?
One thing that comes to mind is Musashi's concept of no design, no conception.
No design, no conception.
It's a state of pure action where you move and react instinctively without the constraints of conscious thought.
That sounds pretty amazing, but hard.
It takes practice, yeah. But it's about pushing yourself, developing trust in your own ability.
It's like Nike's slogan, just do it.
Exactly. And he emphasizes adaptability, too. True mastery isn't about sticking to rigid rules. You have to flow with things, adapt.
Or water.
Exactly. Water can take any shape, adapt to any container.
Right. Okay, so be like water. I like that. Be open to new experiences, new ways of doing things.
That's it.
This has been great.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this section, I have one final question for our listeners.
Okay.
Musashi talks about finding the way in everything. My question to you is, what's your way? What battles are you fighting?
That's a good one.
What goals are you trying to achieve? And how can you use the principles we've talked about today to get there? Okay, so we've covered a lot of Musashi's philosophy, but his life didn't end with him writing the book, right? What happened in his later years?
Well, he actually became a retainer for the Hosokawa clan.
Like, he served a lord.
He did. And he even fought in the Shimabara rebellion.
Really? Against who?
It was against Christians, actually.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wasn't just a philosopher. He was definitely a man of action.
He was.
But eventually, he did retreat from the world, seeking a more solitary life. He went to a cave where he wrote the Book of Five Rings.
It's like he went from warrior to philosopher to hermit.
Yeah, it was quite a journey.
And it's important to remember that, he wasn't just focused on swordsmanship. He was also really into painting and calligraphy. It's like he was this Renaissance man.
He was.
So his teachings, they weren't just about combat.
They were about mastering life itself.
Okay, I think we need a moment to let all this sink in. We've covered so much, but there's still more to explore in the Book of Five Rings, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Musashi was brilliant. We'll be back in a flash to wrap up this deep dive, so don't go anywhere. We've got more to come. And we're back. Wrapping up our deep dive into, you guessed it, the Book of Five Rings.
Time flies when you're talking Musashi.
It really does. I mean, what a journey, huh?
Yeah, we covered a lot from his crazy early life to
Hmm.
his deep insights on, well, everything from strategy to self-discovery.
Totally. And the nature of reality, too.
Right. But I feel like, we only just scratched the surface. There's so much more.
There is, for sure. But I think we've hit on some, really key themes that sum up his thinking pretty well.
We have. Look, one thing that I keep coming back to is his focus on practicality. Musashi wasn't into all that theoretical stuff. He cared about what worked, what gets results in real life.
He was all about the practical stuff.
Yeah. Remember when he compared strategy to carpentry?
Oh, yeah, he was all about that solid foundation.
Right. It's about understanding the tools and adapting, you
Yeah.
know? Like, each situation is unique.
So it's not just knowing the moves, but knowing when to use them.
Exactly. He
Yeah.
talked about timing, rhythm, sensing the flow. You have to be able to react and adapt, right?
Totally. That makes me think about, well, pretty much every part of my life.
Yeah.
Work, relationships, even, just navigating daily life.
I know what you mean. It's like Musashi's teachings, they're so applicable to, well, just about everything.
They really are. They're about understanding challenges and figuring out how to deal with them no matter what they are.
Exactly. Now, since we're on the topic of practical advice, is there anything specific that we can take from Musashi and use in our lives?
Ooh, good question.
One thing that stands out is, this concept of knowing the times.
Knowing the time.
It's about being aware of the context of a situation,
Yeah.
like what's happening around you, the larger picture, the bigger forces at play,
So it's about being aware.
super aware. And, it could be something small like knowing when to cross a busy street or something big like a business deal. You need to assess the situation accurately and act based on that.
Don't rush in blindly.
Yeah. Take a step back and detach from your emotions a bit, see things objectively. Musashi believed that this kind of awareness is, well, it's essential for making good decisions. You can avoid conflict too, and ultimately achieve your goals.
That makes me think of mindfulness practices. Being present, paying attention.
Oh, that's a great connection.
Yeah.
Musashi was big on observation. He wanted us to really see the details, because those details, they often reveal the bigger picture.
Before we wrap up, I have to ask, what was the biggest surprise for you while exploring the Book of Five Rings? Anything that really changed your perspective?
Honestly.
Yeah.
It was his emphasis on the void.
Mhm.
At first I thought, well, this is just, some abstract Zen concept. But when I really thought about it, I realized how practical and powerful it actually
It's
is.
not just philosophical, it's useful.
Totally.
Can you remind everyone what the void is all about? I think it can be a little confusing.
The void is basically a state of pure potential. It's about being free from preconceived ideas, not being attached to specific outcomes. You're present, you're engaged, but without trying to control everything.
You're letting go.
You're letting go. It's about being open,
In
adaptable.
water.
Exactly.
Uh,
Flowing with the changes. Musashi believed that when we let go of, our anxieties and our need to control, we access this deeper wisdom, like an intuition that guides us.
It's like a paradox. The less you try to force things, the more you achieve.
Exactly. I think Musashi's onto something really profound here. It's about letting go of the ego, fear of failure, and trusting that something deeper is guiding you.
I love that. This deep dive has been such a journey, honestly. I feel like we've only just begun to explore Musashi's ideas.
Me too.
They're so rich and multi-layered. I mean, wow.
It's true. There's so much depth to his thinking. And I hope our listeners feel the same way, that this is just the beginning,
I think they do. Well, everyone, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the Book of Five Rings. We've covered Musashi's life, his philosophy, and, we went through all 5 books: Earth, Water, Fire, Wind, and Void. And we talked about how to apply his teachings to our lives today.
It's been a really great journey.
It has.
And I hope it's inspired everyone to think differently about strategy, about self-mastery, and about life itself.
Absolutely. Remember, the learning never stops. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to be your best selves. Until next time, keep diving deep.